us today for the Edit from Anywhere with Edit on Demand presentation. The webinar will be conducted by Kent Peterson, Senior Solution Specialist for the Avid pre-sales team. I would like to thank Kent, Corey Tedrow, and Michael Krulik for their support in the development and execution of this webinar. For your convenience, this webinar will be recorded and made available for on-demand viewing at a later date. Please know that Corey and Michael are standing by to answer any questions you may have during the presentation. We will also have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, just click the Q&A icon on the menu bar and submit your questions. And now, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Kent Peterson.
Thank you very much, Angel, for the presentation, for the announcement. And that, as Angel said, my name is Kent Peterson. I'm a Senior Solution Specialist for Avid. I'm actually broadcasting this straight out of my home today. I live just north of Toronto in Canada. And so everything that you're going to see is basically from my house, from Canada, basically connecting into data centers down in the States. So I'll move forward now, and what we're going to do is I'm going to do some slides, and then I'll do a demo afterwards. Nothing's been pre-recorded, so you know, this is as live as can be, so it'll give you a good idea of what to expect when signing up for the solution. So what is Edit on Demand? Well, Edit on Demand, or EOD, you might hear people saying, is a virtualized production environment. So what we did was we basically are giving you a SaaS model where you can subscribe monthly or weekly to a full offering, basically a full production facility in the cloud. What this gives you the capabilities of doing right now is having up to 30 Media Composer seats, so 30 virtual machines, and 200 terabytes of NEXIS storage in the cloud. If you're not familiar with an Avid NEXIS storage, it's basically our shared storage offering. We've taken that file system, moved it to the cloud, and are giving you all the same capabilities that you get on-prem up in the cloud and in this specific offering. Another great thing about it too is that there is no overages or hidden fees or anything. So whatever you pay per month, per week, is what the final number is going to be as you move forward. So what do you get with this whole thing? So the way we work is we have basically a foundation. So if you decide weekly or monthly, you pay for a base subscription. That base subscription is going to give you the capabilities of having the whole implementation put up. Then you also are given all the softwares that you would require as well. So you're not bringing anything like that to the table. We're offering you the File Catalyst software, which is basically a patented upload facility, or basically a software to increase speeds for uploading and downloading. We're also offering you the Teradici PC over IP connection, remote connections, and that's an Emmy award-winning technology that has been developed specifically for, you know, graphic type applications to be able to log into remote machines and actually have a performance that you would expect if you were actually physically there. You also, in that base, get a download and egress all included. Okay, so basically egress is basically the downloading capabilities of what you might bring back down from the system. Full Avid support in that base as well. And then what you do is you purchase subscription, or basically credits on top of that. So you're picking, you know, how many seats do I need? So how many virtual machines do I need to have? How many terabytes of NEXIS storage do I need? We sell those in 1 terabyte increments. And so you add as many terabytes as you need. The nice thing about this, right, because it is dynamic, you can go and add more storage on the fly as you go along in your subscription. Likewise, remove it, or when it expires, not add more back into it. Same thing applies for the seats themselves. The seats, we have kind of set up right now a 40-hour a week kind of scenario per virtual machine, editing machine basically. We tend to find that that's kind of the average of what people are using. A lot of times it's less because remember, it's interactive time, the time that you're actually physically on that machine. And if you go and log out of that machine, it's not ticking anymore. It basically shuts down that virtual machine. So this is basically what you're seeing with your deployment. So what we do is we deploy it in our tendency in the cloud. And so you'll get your Avid NEXIS storage, you'll get your Media Composer virtual machines. And like I said, the Teradici is included. So basically the way to connect to those virtual machines. You get your File Catalyst server, which is basically an accelerator to upload and download. And all you're bringing now is you're bringing your desktop computers. So whether it's Macs, whether it's PCs, or whether you have a Zero client at your house or at your business, that is all you need. So you don't need high powerful machines because basically all you're doing is remoting into the actual systems themselves. The system will allow you to create up to 60 users. So if you say you had 2 virtual machines, you could have 60 users created. Obviously only 2 could log in at one time on those 2 virtual machines. Like I said, 30 is kind of the concurrent that we've set up right now. So 30 virtual machines, all accessing the same storage, the same projects at the same time. For the uploads, we can get 5 simultaneous uploads, and then the rest of them queue as it goes along for the upload. And then if you need to have plugins installed, we can get plugins installed into the Media Composers as well. From there, just give you kind of an idea of some of the data centers that we've already hooked into. These data centers are mainly based on capabilities of the Azure data centers because we need the GPU horsepowers for all the Media Composers. So you have your US East, and that's the one I'm actually going to be logging into today. The West, the Central, then obviously Europe and Asia Pacific as well. As we've been going along, additional data centers are being added to the region or to this offering so that we can cover, you know, a greater territory as Microsoft adds more GPU powers. This is really important to understand if you're not familiar with, you know, remote technologies in the sense of, you know, going to these cloud-based solutions. The biggest thing that is of importance is the latency to your computer, okay? Not as much, you know, how fast it comes down to your house or your location, but more the latency to get to that data center itself. So these are some of the numbers that we've kind of come up with for the way things will feel. So 50 milliseconds, you basically are sitting on that machine. 50 to 100, which is typically where I fit into the scope, the responsiveness is very close to being 100% like I'm on that specific machine. And, you know, editing wise, no problems at all working in that range. Once you get into 100 and 250, then the interactiveness becomes much slower. It's fine in the sense that if you're an assistant or you're doing transcodes or you're doing uploads, those types of things, those are not an issue whatsoever. You know, it's for those, you know, high-end editors that are pounding away at the keyboard and expecting things to happen instantaneously. Then when it comes down to what do I need for download capabilities at my house or my location, for a single monitor setup, basically at 1920 by 1080 or 1200, you know, 10 to 20 megabits per second per monitor. So if you had 3 monitor display that you wanted to have set up, you're talking about approximately 60 megabits per second that you need to have coming into your house. Obviously, if I decide I want to do full screen playback, then that number changes because with the technology of the Teradici, basically the pixel draw is really what's coming to the computer screen. So when you go to full screen playback, the image is basically changing all the time. Whereas when you're on an editing app, you typically have less pixels being manipulated when you're actually moving around. And as I said before, you know, support wise, Mac or PC, doesn't matter. And then Zero client, which is basically kind of like a dumb terminal that actually has the software on it. Now, one thing to also mention is when you do deploy this, you also get the capabilities of picking what kind of computers you want to have up there. So we have two offerings. One is a standard and one is an advanced seat. So you can see here the CPU differences between them. Typically the standards, it's at a lower cost, and it's great for, the offline editing, for producers to be able to look at content up there. Then if you're into a scenario where, somebody's doing a lot of crunching, like whether it's transcoding, whether it's rendering or multi-layers and higher resolution files, then maybe you'll subscribe and have some credits for the the advanced seats. Now, one thing that's really interesting too is that when it comes down to the actual NEXIS cloud storage, well, typically on-prem, a single chassis, 10 drive, one media pack does between 400 600 megs per second. We are giving you that per client. So it's basically like an SSD setup right now. So when it comes down to streaming high resolutions to get to those advanced seats, the bottleneck is not going to be the storage. It'll typically be the CPU itself, that it just can't handle X amount of streams at 4K, for instance. So that's a really important thing to know when it comes down to the actual storage. Super, super fast. Another thing too, if you look at the bottom right here, Media Composer software. When you do deploy it, if you're a Avid user that has to have the old interface, then we can deploy 2018. And it's something that you do. We don't do it. You pick it when you're actually going to deploy the whole thing. And then if you want the new interface, then we're putting on 2021.2 currently. Now, I highly recommend to go to the 21 because it's a new interface. It's been streamlined. It has a lot of new benefits with regards to the software, speed, all kinds of things like that. And so I'd highly recommend, give Media Composer Ultimate 2021 a shot and see what you think about it. And there's a lot of videos out there for people that are coming from the old interface and want to go to the new interface too. These are just some different types of facilities that have been using the system. Some of them at the beginning before we started shipping. So when COVID came around, ultimately, we were in the midst of just kind of testing this all out with some customers, and then it got fast-tracked to actually release it. Some of these customers, like Gorilla, for instance, were on the early access plan. They did several shows on it, and they've continued on with the production. I'm going to talk about a couple right now. So just to give you an idea, this were some of the comments that we got back from some of the customers, saying, like Gorilla, it's fantastic. Like the deal here is that everyone's recognizing that it's almost like being on-prem in the sense that, I can be anywhere accessing super fast machines and getting my work done for me. A&E is one of our new customers on the EOD side. And basically what they're looking for was they wanted to be able to provide other affiliates within their organization production setups as fast as possible. So not necessarily investing in a whole pile of new architecture, but being able to spin up production environments ultimately in the cloud and on demand. So they have been using this, and they have ranges from 5 to 25 seat production subscriptions. So they've opted to not just do one big subscription, they have multiple subscriptions for the different affiliates. And to give you kind of an idea of what that kind of looks like here, this is just a simple slide that kind of shows you what their workflow is. So if we look down here at the bottom here, so stuff comes into the facility, they transcode it to DNX36. They happen to already have Avid NEXIS and Media Composers, so they're well aware of what that offers them on-prem. They use the File Catalyst transfer client to upload it to their cloud tenancy. Now, one thing to make clear as well is when you do a subscription and you do do a deployment, that deployment is dedicated to you only. Okay, so that file catalyst server, that TC over IP, the PC over IP, Teradici, that environment 100% yours. You're not sharing that with anybody else. So this all goes up, and then they have their remote editors editing away. When they're finished to edit, they either download a project or a bin and then reconform it at the other end. So very easy process to do. Now, another thing too is that we've put on the Boris effects on their media composers in the cloud. They are using the NDI plugin that's standard with Media Composer to broadcast the video out of the editor basically into a Zoom meeting, kind of like we're doing right now, but instead of seeing me and seeing my slides, you'd actually see the output of the Media Composer so that they can have interactive viewing of content and commentary at the same time so that the editor can be editing and changing things while somebody is on the other end somewhere watching the output of that Media Composer. So those are some of the tools that they're using. Another company here, Peter Polk, film producer, he does a lot of independent stuff. And what they're doing is they tried a 2-week subscription to see whether or not it would make sense to do a 6-month production schedule. And the interesting thing about this one, which is different than the A&E, is that we're talking about a production where they have assistant editors in New Zealand, and their editors and producers are in LA. So how is that going to perform for them in the fact that they're in 2 totally different geographies? So once again, similar layout. Now they happen to have as well Avid, NEXIS, and Media Composer. But what I want to make it really clear here is you don't have to have either of those at your place. Okay, so if I was going to do a production myself right now, and I don't have NEXIS at my house, obviously, and I went and shot a bunch of footage, I just need a computer. I just need a way to basically do an upload to get to my instance up in the cloud. So there's nothing special from NEXIS to NEXIS going on or anything along those ways. They just happen to have that stuff for their environments. So they're uploading content, DNX content as well. Now they're sending low res because obviously time is easier, faster to get it to that location. You could upload full res if you wanted to the cloud, but it's all just time at that point in time. In this case, in New Zealand, that's where all the content is. They don't need to have the same latencies there because they're just doing assistant stuff, transcoding, uploading, and so forth like that. The editors, though, on the other hand, are in LA. So what they did was they did a deployment in the West, right, West US, because that is closer to them, and that's going to give the editors and the producers the best performance that they can possibly get. And so slightly different scenario. So that's kind of how you can work from different geographies. You kind of pick the best place for the main portion of it. Okay. So another company workflow that's happening. Now, I just want to really cover this really quick and briefly, just due to time. Avid On Demand, like I said, basically using Zoom, use the NDI plugin within Media Composer. It's been in there for, like probably 6 versions at least. So you'll have it if you already have Media Composer. You can actually use it right now. But putting it into Zoom, letting multiple people view it, and then making comments at that point. When it comes down to uploading the content, there's 2 ways of doing it. One through the web browser, which I'll show you. And then the other way is to install the hot folder onto your computer. So if you want to make it so that it's more automated, you can create a folder on your computer. You can drop renders into it, and it'll automatically send up when it senses new files, hit that folder up to the cloud and show up there. So it can be much more automated in that sense. Just to give you a little idea of where we are with some of the stuff. So when we came out with the 2021.2, we added the new types of seats to reduce cost in some of the VMs. We also came out with the weekly subscriptions to give people a little bit more flexibility on what they wanted, and added some more regions. Some things that we're working on right now is we want to get it so that you can auto deploy third-party plugins. Right now, when you do have your subscription, we lock down the virtual machines so you don't have admin privileges. In order to put any plugins or some additional softwares on those right now, Avid needs to basically give you access to those virtual machines to install them. So we're going to work on a more automated way that we can deploy plugins for you, and that so it's not coming through us to do it. Working on dashboard too. Another thing too is we're also working towards, if you happen to have NEXIS on-prem, syncing capabilities, syncing projects between the two locations and media at the same time. Nearline storage, so basically taking, we have the super fast storage up there, let's get some nearline up there so we can start moving some stuff off that's not as crucial for playback, but at a much lower price for storage to just get product up there. And then our production management tools, they'll be going up later in the year as well to give some asset management up in the cloud and in this SaaS model. So with no further ado, I'm going to go now and I'm going to show you some of the tools and all that. And this will be all live. I'm going to shut my camera off at this point. I think you've seen my COVID hair long enough. And let's go and see what's going on. So first of all, let me just go in here, and we're just going to go to my web browser. So like I said, I'm north in Canada, basically just north of Toronto. I'm going to go and show you how easy it is to do the subscription right off the bat. You go to your Avid master account. So in this case, this is my master account. And what's going to happen here, that's not the one I'm going to want here. Let's just, sorry, let me just go to my master account again. And so here's my master account. So like any Avid product, you always get a redemption code, right, when you purchase something. So you go, you say, hey, Avid, I need 3 months of this EOD, and I need 4 editors, and I need 4 terabytes of storage. You pay us, we give you a redemption code. You go to your master account, you go register. At that point, you enter your redemption code in here. Once you've registered the product, it shows up just like any other product. So if I look under my products, you will now see edit on demand credits. In my case right now, you can see I actually today added a redemption in there, and I now have 1 month subscription. Okay, so I'm all monthly in my subscription, but I have a quantity of 4. So that's going to give me 4 months basically of edit on demand. Or I could have 4 different subscriptions go off in 1 month. Then I have 4 1 terabyte. So potentially I could, for 1 month, I could say 4 terabytes of media, or I could spread it out for 4 months. Advanced seats, I got 6, and standard seats, I have 6. Okay, so these are credits now that I can use in any fashion I want to. And you can add additional credits when they run out, or suddenly you need more of them. So if I go here, use credits, I can create a new subscription. So this would be a whole brand new one, or I can say update. Right now I have a subscription already running. So what I want to do is actually show you how you would do this if you were going to update it. Okay, so I've already got one going. I'm going to say, yeah, okay, we're going to update this one. So I say confirm here, and now you see my subscription. So interesting thing about my subscription is that obviously I've been running it for quite some time, several months, and my subscription end date right now is set to September 4th. These are all the different implements that I've done, from adding 1 terabyte of storage to adding different seats. Last month I went and had 5 seats of Media Composer running. And then down at the bottom, now I have what I have available to me to go and add to the subscription I currently have. So if I buy enough credits for 6 months, I don't have to go and deploy those all at one time. I can say, okay, for the first 2 months, I just want to deploy what I think I need. And then when it gets closer to that third month, things might have changed. So I'll deploy it then. So in my case here, right, I could add another term if I wanted to. So I could add another credit so that I extend it past September. Then if I wanted to do this, I can now see, okay, on the 7/29, my Media Composer seats are going to expire. So I'm probably going to need some Media Composer at that point. So I might say, you know, one of advanced that I need here. So we'll just do one here. Then maybe I need to have a standard because we're going to have a producer. We're going to have two producers come in, for instance, or need two lighter weight. And then lastly, you know, we're going to need a terabyte of storage because once this month ends on the 29th for my storage, I'm going to need to continue at least that amount so that I don't lose any of my media. Here, you'll notice the start term. So if I had to start today because I just suddenly got more and I need more editors, great, you do it at that point. Or you just go and you specify when you want these to actually be deployed. Nice thing about this is if this was a brand new subscription, if my subscription was going to happen after the holidays, so after the 4th of July, or in our case, Canada Day, that's tomorrow, I could go and do this all up. I could then say next. And at that point in time, I look at it and go, okay, yeah, that's great. All this is going to deploy on that date. And then I say, I accept, update subscription. And on that date, that subscription would start off. It'd be all ready to go and ready for your production to happen. So that's how easy it is to add to a subscription, create a subscription, and how you can pick and choose what you want to actually deploy at the specific dates and times. What we're going to do now is we're going to go off and I'm going to show you what happens when you have your subscription. So right now I have a subscription and here you suddenly have another choice. You have Avid on-demand portal. So I'm going to click on that and it's going to come up. And as you can see, I have had 4 subscriptions. 2 of them have been canceled. 1 has been frozen. And what that means when it's frozen like this, it means that I have not followed through past the end dates on either adding more storage, adding edit or VMs to that, or extending just my base itself. So we freeze the account at that point. We try to recontact you. You know, if you just forgot to do it, fine, do it and then do it. We keep it at a certain grace time. So we give you some time before it's taken away. Okay, so we give you, I think it's about a week right now, where, you know, we'll try to contact you and allow you to basically re-up it. Or if for some reason, you know, you're done with it, but you need to get the media off and you just didn't get time to do that, we'll give you that option to get that media off the system before we go and wipe it to clean. Now, if we look at my active one, if I expand the active out, you can see this is where I create my users. So if I want to go and create a new user, I hit new user here. I type down here and I go, let's go Jeffrey. Oops, learn how to spell here. And then I can go and say submit, or I can say, hey, let's create another one. Okay. So let's just do this. We'll go Justin, for instance, and I'll hit submit. So you can see right now what's happened is it's been submitted to the system. It's pending processes in the back end. At some point, this is going to go and change to processing. And then at some point, it'll hit active. Now, a couple things just to mention in here is that the WS admin is a default user that we give you at the very beginning of your subscription. This is the administrator to the NEXIS to give you the flexibility of changing things on the NEXIS. So it's a base user. From there, you create all your additional users. Over on the right-hand side, we've also added it so because editors will come and go, you can delete them. The little half circle there, that basically allows you to reset their password. So for instance, in some cases, you know, they maybe forgot their password. God knows I forget mine all the time because I have so many of them. you just hit reset. And then what happens, you can see that's what changed the process now. You go and you get an arbitrary password. At that point, what will happen is when we go in and log in for the first time, it will ask for that password and then it's going to correct it. So I'm going to show you how that actually happens in a second here. So think of me as Mr. Miller right now. I've created Mr. Miller. This is my arbitrary password, which I haven't been sent yet. Under system here, here's all your system information. So here's my system ID. So if you had some support problems, there's your system ID. There's 3 things that you need to copy. You have your desktop installer for the Teradici software. You have the URL for the setup that you have. Now, you notice how mine says East US pre-sales. That prefix is something that I picked. So I wanted to distinguish it in a certain way. You can go and distinguish it in however way you want, whether it be the name of the production, the name of your company, it could be anything. And the file catalyst, the file transfer HTTPS one, that's for the file catalyst. So if you need, if somebody is not going to be uploading or downloading, you don't share that URL with them. So typically what I would do is I would copy and paste these, the username and the password, and email it off to the individual. So in my case, I've copied it onto my notepad here, and I'm going to show you how you go and get into the Teradici at the moment. Okay, so let me just just log out of here for a sec, sign out. So here's my Teradici software. It's launched. I'm going to go create a new connection. So there's a new connection, and I need the host address. So this is the host address that you were given. So we'll type that in, and we'll call this Toronto EOD just because. So this is just a name that helps you know what the button is basically at a later date. From there, I'm going to hit next and a connecting. So now it needs a username, okay? And because I reset my username for Miller, okay, and Justin's still processing, we're just going to use Miller here. So let's type in Miller, and then I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy the password, and we'll just go back here and we'll paste that in and say login. So of course, what you see is an error. Well, the funny thing is, it probably shouldn't be called an error, because really all it's telling you to do is, hey, we need you to change that password because it's the first time you've logged into the system. So I'm going to say close. It's going to say, hey, give me that old password, and let's give the new password. And we'll do the new password again, and we'll say done. And so now what it's doing is it's updating your password, and it takes me to the virtual machines that I have accessible to me. So you'll notice that I have 2 virtual machines on this particular subscription enabled, just like it was shown before. I have one that says ready, so that means it's up and running. The one stopped means it's not running. It's stopped, and if I clicked on it, it would power it up, and then I would log into that particular machine. If somebody was on the machine, it would say that it's occupied, it's used, okay? So in this case, I'm going to log into here. You can set it up and save it so that every time I log in as Miller here, I would always go into this machine. But I'm going to go and say connect at this point, and we're going to connect into it. So there we go. It's going to launch it. And I've just logged in. So I am in the virtual machine up in the cloud, and what you're seeing is, your defaulted backdrop and everything like that. Now, one thing that you can do is you can do whatever you want on the desktop level. So if you like to have a funky, background, you can do that. If you want to have folders all around, you can do that. It's just the administrative stuff that you can't do. Everything that you do here in your account will be there the next time that you log into that machine. So it's not going to get wiped away or anything at that point either. So let me just go in. I'm just going to launch Media Composer just so that it's up and running when we get to it. But you can see here, I have the connection manager for Mr. Miller. Okay, you can see here that he has 3 workspaces that have been assigned to him. To show you how you can go and administrate the admin part of it, we're just going to log in. So an administrator typically, you know, for Justin there, when it finally processes through, what an administrator would do would be they would log into one of the virtual machines. They would go in as WS admin, right? Like I mentioned before, that special username. Then they will type in their password for it. This gives you the dashboard. So this is a simplified interface for NEXIS in the cloud. Down the side here, normally we'd have a lot of additional things like media packs and all that, but because it's not a physical hardware, that stuff has been taken away. But the important part is the workspaces. So these are workspaces, these are mount points. If you're not familiar with NEXIS, our shared storage, I highly recommend you check some of the other webinars that have been recorded to really get a good idea of it, because everything that you kind of see on-prem is basically what you're seeing here. If I go into any of this, I can go in and say, hey, you know, I want to create a new workspace. I want to call webinar. I want to have that size. Then, you know, I would suddenly want to see Justin's been already added, right? So it's been added to it. I can say, you know, Justin's going to have read-write access to that one. And then Miller, he's going to have read access to that, and hit save. So instantaneously, what's happened is it's created a workspace called webinar. It's accessible to people to actually use that. So very, very simple. And, you know, some of the advantages, obviously, of the shared storage is I can scale it up from 200. I can scale it down to redistribute it. I have my setup just for sakes. I have my projects and I have my media separately, and then I have an upload folder. This is not a requirement. This just kind of helps in some of the project sharing aspects. So Media Composer is running in the background. I want to show you how you get content up to the system. So let's just go quickly to here. I'm going to go, once again, we're going to go in and I'm going to show you the File Catalyst portion. So this is the File Catalyst login here that we're going to go. It launches a simple applet. If you don't have it already installed on your system, it'll basically allow you to download it and install it. From here, I can use whatever that credential was. So I could use Miller if I wanted to. I'm going to use Kent in this case. And I'm just going to go confirm, and we're going to connect in. So this is the web interface. So first thing on the right-hand side here, what you're seeing are the workspaces that are accessible to me. These are the ones that I just showed you up there. So I have eval, projects, and upload available to me. On the left-hand side here, this is my actual physical computer at home. So if I go into here, you can see basically the different folders that I have and the different interval files. So if I want to send up a project, so like say I wanted to send all these files up, I can select them independently if I want to, or what I can do is I can just say, hey, let's do that and just upload. So I'm going to upload this content. So it's going to start to transfer. Like I don't know if I said it or not, I'm about 500 megabits download capabilities, but my upload is actually only 15 megabits. So it's not a fast upload whatsoever. You can see these are basically churning through really quickly, and basically they're almost uploaded. So, oh, I've already uploaded this before. Let's just go in here. Sorry, I made a mistake. I wasn't in the actual workspace when I wanted to do the upload, so let's just do that again. So let's go here. So now what it's doing is it's going to upload to that workspace. My fault. I was actually at the top of, you know, all the workspaces, so I didn't even know where to put it. So you can see this is now putting it into the upload folder itself. Now, that's how you upload content. Same thing applies coming back down, right? So if I go to a workspace that I want to, I can click on that workspace. So if I wanted, you know, to download this particular thing to my system, I navigate to whatever drive I want, I hit download, and it would do the reverse. Something that I forgot to mention before was I wanted to actually show you the speed test. So I just want to give you a quick idea. So I've went to that speed test that was for my latencies. You can see right now it's going to pull my latencies to all the different data centers. Right now I'm seeing about 80 milliseconds. So it's jumping all around the place, but that's kind of the bracket that I'm getting from my remote location to get down to state. So I'm actually getting down to 62. So I'm well within that, performance spectrum right there. Let's go to the Teradici here, and let's just go to my Media Composer. So at this point in time, I don't have any projects, but what I want to do is I want to go, because I have it set up this way, to my projects workspace. The important thing is to understand that with Avid Media Composer, if you want to have shared projects, you need to put the projects in a place that people can get to. And so if I save a project locally on this machine, next time I log in, I might not be going to this machine, and therefore my project will not be there accessible to me. So by putting your projects on a workspace, so it could be a workspace that's just called the production, it has media and the project in it, or you can do it my way where I have them separated. You then have the capabilities of going to any machine and always accessing what you need to do. If I go into, say, Orville here, and I'll just open this. This is the new interface. If you haven't seen Media Composer 2021, this is the interface here. And I'm just going to go in and show you what you get here. So this particular timeline, okay, I can scrub through it. Obviously, Zoom sometimes is good, sometimes not so great, but it's basically keeping up the way I would expect it to be if it was sitting on my machine right now. Multi-layers of video and multi-layers of audio. Okay, so it's not a small little timeline. If I hit play.
Here we go.
Okay, gives you an idea. If I want to JKL it, okay. I have all the same tools. This is not a different version of Media Composer. This is just Media Composer Ultimate. So everything that you're used to doing with it, color correcting, doing, all your audio effects on here, any of your video effects, your multi-streams, and that come into multi-streams, you might have noticed or might not have noticed is that down at the bottom, I have it in green mode. So because the power of my machine, the advanced seat, I have no problems going in full quality mode on this. Or I can bump it down if I needed to accommodate, the throughput for the effects and everything that I have at that point. Now, with regards to this particular timeline here, you'll see that, the media is all on the NEXIS. That's why I have the little squiggles underneath here. I can scrub across, mark ins and outs, do all the standard stuff that you would expect to be able to do. Another thing that's important to know, if I had a 9-way multicam, I could do a 9-way multicam virtually through here too. One thing that right now, as it stands with the technologies, is when it comes to audio, the only thing that you're going to get back down on your computer is stereo audio. Okay, so it's a limitation that's happening right now. We're working on it. Teradici's working on it. A bunch of different solutions are working on the capabilities of getting more than just stereo coming back to the actual desktop, as well as the capabilities of being able to go beyond just that NDI plug-in here, where I have it right over here, to giving it like an SRT stream, so we can actually stream an IP out of here to get to a broadcast monitor or something along those lines. So those are things that are in development for us right now, and you will be coming, later year to next year kind of time frame. Now, when I'm in here, I have some choices, right? So if I'm uploaded high-res media and I need to get it done, export it out, it's fine. I just go click on here, right? I have my standard output. I can export to file, flatten it, and then use whatever service I want to deliver it to. So I could go to a web browser, send it to a service from here, or I could use my Cloud Catalyst and download it on my computer at home and then basically distribute it from that point in time. Or, like we said before, simple, because I have the different workspaces and I have the capabilities of just taking the project itself or the bin and emailing it to somebody or downloading it through the file catalyst to the main system that has all the other high-res media and just do a reconform at that case, maybe, color grading, whatever you might need to do, some audio and so forth like that. So these are the tools and how easy it is to be able to go in, deploy a full production environment. And I actually forgot, when I do that subscription and then I go and pick, the region and all that kind of stuff, it takes us approximately 2 hours to have it all built for you. Okay, so it's all automated in the back, 2 hour turnaround to get that production up and running. And then it's up to you basically to just create users, create the workspaces like I have here, and send out the emails to people with their logins and their credentials. So I hope at this point that I've kind of covered everything that I can think of. And so I think what I'll do is I'll go to Michael and Corey, and maybe we can answer some questions live that came up in the chat that wasn't answered by anybody. So guys, any questions?
Yeah, there's a few questions. I think one place we could start with, there's a few questions, but one place to start is if you could pop back to the slide that covers minimum bandwidth. There was a couple questions about the bandwidth, so we can just make sure that that's clear for everyone.
Yep. I think it's here or there. Yep. Okay.
And then while that's up, the other question was just a general question about pricing, which I think the answer is that there is a free trial you can request, but basically in order to get pricing, I believe you need to reach out to an account rep.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what we can do with customers that are interested in this, obviously account reps can give you a ballpark pricing for it. What we like to do, if you have a production that you're thinking about doing, we have some spreadsheets that we work with that will allow you to kind of fill it in based on your production schedule, and that'll give us good ideas of how many clients you're going to need for each time, and that's something you fill in. We can give a more accurate pricing on that point. And then if it's something that's of high interest, we can, like you said, Corey, we can definitely give you a subscription for a week, possibly 2 weeks to, test it out, make sure it's going to work. And then, obviously at that point, turn it around and be a paid subscription. We don't give it out to everybody, mainly because it costs us, obviously, to deploy these every time. And so if it's a serious interest and after you've kind of got an idea of numbers, then yes, we can definitely do a trial for sure.
Hi, Kent. There was a question going back to servers, or what servers are being used for the VMs that are created. I think there you had a slide explaining the basic and the advanced and what's chosen for that. I don't think we have a specific model for the server, but
yeah, I mean, so we have specific machines, like there are NV machines on Azure that we're using. I can't remember the exact model itself, but they're whatever the model is, they're basically equivalent to the CPU horsepower here and the memory given. So these are specific for Media Composer. Okay, so when it comes down to the NEXIS itself, it's a very different scenario. And because this is all automated in the back end, the great thing about this offering is that you don't need to know anything about cloud infrastructures. You don't need to know how to deploy anything. You basically answer a couple questions, you pick your credits, and everything just happens in the back end, opposed to you having to go to Microsoft, for instance, have your own setup, and then start building these things. We can assist in a scenario where you might have an Azure account already and you want to have a setup that you want to have forever kind of deal, more like a year, 2 years type environment where you may be moving everything that way. We definitely have services for that to help you with those types of things. This offering is purely, let's get her up and running, let's get it going, and here we'll give you all the tools to do the production.
One more, so if you could pop back to the bandwidth slide, there was one clarification, customers asking if the bandwidth is upload or download speeds.
So the bandwidth there is download speeds. So if at my home, if you have say 20 megabits and that's what your download speed is, then basically you can have a single monitor display to that media composer, that virtual machine. That's just for interactiveness, right? Typically, I mean, most people have more than 20 megabits, but in the sense of, that screen, latency is going to be the killer first. And then as long as you fit in with the megabits, then you're all good to go.
And then there's a couple of questions specifically related to in your demo, you talked about Justin's house, and the question was whether or not that was a zero client, and then if there's no zero client, then the computer needs to be running Teradici. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yeah, in my case here, for instance, right, I have a PC laptop. So I have a PC laptop. Like I said, it doesn't have to be the newest computers or anything like that because it's just PC over IP client, right? So that's the client that I connected to. And so I downloaded it. If you have a zero client, which is basically like a dumb terminal that you can purchase, they actually have the PC over IP Teradici client on a lot of those. And so they just click it and it kind of just goes to that interface that I showed you before I started adding the URL and all that into, and then it just goes straight out to it. So, so it covers kind of, Mac, Windows, or, the zero client if you happen to want to distribute that, because some companies, what they're doing is they're purchasing zero clients and sending them to their remote editors so that they know it's all preset. That's going to get to the, the cloud offering automatically, and all they have to do is type in their password. They don't have to do anything else. At that point. So some customers, they decide to just send zero clients to their editors. So that's definitely an option.
I did want to mention, Ricardo, I think you have your hand up in the chat. If you had a question, if you could type that into the Q&A, we'll be able to ask that.
There's a couple of questions I wanted to clarify. One was regarding NEXIS workspaces. When we originally shipped Edit on Demand, I believe you could only have one big NEXIS workspace. And then now today, and I'm not sure when we release this, but you can, like a regular on-prem NEXIS, set up your own individual workspaces, right?
Yeah, exactly. Originally, you didn't have the whole interface, like the NEXIS HTML interface. And then when we started shipping it, and I guess it's a month or so now, at least, well, even before a month, it's probably the last 2-3 months, we added the capabilities of people creating their own workspaces into it. We create one initially when you do the deployment, and which you're welcome to use, because we just have to have one workspace there. But after that, you can create all the workspaces you want to have. So there's the same flexibility on basically how many workspaces you can do with it. And then on the user level, obviously you do it through my Avid account, and that creates the users for you.
And then there's a question about third-party plugins. Just to clarify that the customers themselves need the licenses for the third-party plugins. And then if you could just talk about how that would work when you would set it up if you had plugins you wanted to be installed. Yeah,
so what happens currently, and this is something that we're working on to try to automate it, is that you do your deployment, and then suddenly you want to have Boris effects, you want to have a whole bunch of different things on there, and maybe even have After Effects installed on one of the virtual machines. At this moment, you would contact us, and what we would do is we would give your administrator the capabilities of administrating the virtual machine. And so they could install, the plugins and set up, your licenses and all that onto that virtual machine. And we make an agreement, that's going to take 3 days or whatever, excuse me, to do it. And then after that point, we take that privilege away from you. So we'll either do it that way, or we'll install them for you. For instance, like the AMA plugins, because not everybody needs all of them. We'll put AMA plugins on there for you. So it's something that we do. It's something that we can do relatively quickly for you. Obviously, we like lead time, but I was just dealing with a school that's highly considering this right now for some of their quicker courses. And they came up with, hey, what happens if I need AMA plugins? Well, we can definitely roll them in. So when you set up the environment, if you know that you need certain things right off the bat, you contact us. We make sure that it's up and running and has them on there, and you just license them. So you're bringing it to the table. We don't obviously offer them as part of the subscription.
There was a question around, I guess, people who currently have licenses. These are completely independent systems. So if you currently have a perpetual license or a support with current systems, this is completely independent from that, right?
Exactly. Because this service includes everything, and you're not bringing anything to it. Yes. So you'd have your licenses at your house or whatever, and then or at your business, and then, you would get these additional licenses in the cloud. And, if you decide that, hey, we're just going to go 100% cloud, obviously, if you're on subscription, you could let that lapse at your office and then, just use the subscription here instead.
And also another thing to mention that came up in the Q&A but was answered, but for people that missed it, you can work with on-prem system as well. So if you have stuff that you're doing on-prem, you can upload stuff to Avid Edit On Demand work and then download any projects or media and finish on-prem as well, as some of the customer examples showed before, right, Ken?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the big thing, right? Like I tried to kind of convey is that, like these customers here, they happen to have NEXIS on-prem, but if you just have media composers, and even if you have, some other shared storage or whatever it might be, right, in your facility right now, that doesn't matter. Ultimately, media composer is media composer, whether it's in the cloud or whether it's on-prem. So those projects are no different than, you giving me a flash drive with your project and I plugged into another computer somewhere else. So there's nothing special between the versions of software.
I know we're close on time. A couple of other questions. One is about the VM stations and whether they're spun up and spun down. Unless this has changed, my understanding is that basically when you go to log in to your Media Composer client, if it's not already running, it will start spinning up. And then you basically just have to go log in again and give it a minute to log up, to launch. It is spun down after a certain amount of inactivity.
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, what happens is that, like I said, you get 40 hours a week, approximately 174 a month. What happens is when you're on a machine, basically you're ticking away at that time. If it sits idle for, I think it's around 20 minutes, where there's no activity whatsoever, it'll log you out of it, so that it's not ticking away time. And like I showed before, how it said one was ready and one wasn't ready, that one's still up and running, so that's ticking time. The other one's basically shut off. Takes about, I want to say, 5 to 10 minutes for the virtual machine to fire up for the very first time. And so if it has it, if they're all sitting shut off basically, then it'll take approximately probably closer to 10 minutes to fire it up. So it's kind of like, a computer that has a lot to do. And then once it's up and running, you use it, and then like you said, Corey, it'll shut down. It'll shut down itself after X amount of time if it's not being used, so you don't burn your time off. But your storage, just so you know, your NEXIS storage, however, is always running. And you aren't docked. There's no time limits on that on the NEXIS storage. It's only on the media composers.
I don't know how much time we have for more questions. There's one question about if you had an traditional Avid rental vendor that wanted to interact with Edit on Demand on behalf of an existing client, and how would that happen?
So yeah, I have had several customers, ask similar questions that aren't even rental places. And what the nice thing is when I showed you how you can change your prefix, right? So you could become the administrator of that system. So if I was a rental house and I want to give a customer capabilities of editing in the cloud, I'd own the subscription. I would call, my subscription, whatever I wanted to call it, whether it's the rental house name or whether it's that production, but I'm the administrator. So I would create the users for that production that wants to rent it from me ultimately. And then, give them, send them the email with the URL and their passwords to get into it. And they would just use the system, how I predetermined and set up for them. Really similar to what a rental house would do if they're sending the physical hardware anyways. And then, that's how it would be passed through. So you would be ultimately just an administrator of a service that you subscribe to for somebody else, on behalf of somebody else.
And I think maybe we have two more questions if we have enough time. One is just about how can you tell the difference if you're working on an Edit on Demand system versus some other just VM workstation? And then the other question is about just quickly going over the NDI client review setup.
Okay, so I'll do the remote. So what you're seeing here, like when I use this Teradici client, and if you actually look at mine, so I have a bunch of different deployments here. This software can work on a setup that you have already at your office. So in other words, if I have a bunch of PCs at the office and I want to install the Teradici software on there so that I can remote connect to it, I obviously can do that. And I'm going to get the same experience that you're seeing here, along as obviously the network coming out of the office is the same, and all those, caveats are fulfilled. So the experience of, the Teradici piece can be exactly the same. One difference that you're going to get in this scenario is because I'm not having to deal with VPNs and all that kind of stuff, it makes it much easier for remote people to actually access the system, especially people that are outside of the company and you don't want to give them VPN access. So that the interaction is all just based on, what's coming out of the facilities and that you're using, the Teradici software, which is a fantastic software for doing this. It's designed for graphic intensive type applications. The technology is all behind there to make it work really well. Now, when it comes up to the NDI setup, number one, if you Google NDI with Avid, we actually have in our KV center basically how to set that up exactly and what you need to do. But basically, there's a plugin that for Zoom. So we would deploy basically as Zoom software on the machine up in the cloud on the VM machine, so that you would start the meeting off of your virtual machine. You basically would send a stream to it or be given access, right, to send the stream to Zoom, which then everybody would be logging into and seeing just like kind of what I'm doing right now, but with a slide presentation. So exact same kind of setup. But yeah, if you just Google NDI with Avid or with Media Composer, there's a doc that tells you step by step what to do for that. Is that it?
Yeah, one more clarification. You had mentioned if you installing custom things, you can install After Effects and other third-party apps. Does Avid need to help you do that, or once you set up the system, can you do it on your own?
No, yeah. So we need to, like I said, because you don't have the administrative in there, Avid needs to be part of that that setup process to do it currently today. Something you always have to be very careful of too is the license agreements with regards to different applications. It's not as simple as, hey, I'm going to install this application on a cloud-based service. That's why we don't install certain things, because we're not. It's kind of like reselling it. So there are certain things that right now we won't put up onto the machines, but that'll change over time as well. But yeah, like After Effects or Photoshop up on there is no problem at all. We'll enable it or install it for you, and then you license it after that.
I started typing an answer to this question here about starting a new project. Are there any clues to let you know whether you're in an edit on demand environment or a remote VM solution? The only thing I can think of is in an EOD environment, you have to select from a series of media composers, whereas if you're in a standard remote selection, you're going directly into the instance of media composer. But otherwise, there's no other way of knowing if you're in edit on demand or a remote media composer.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, in a sense, I mean, one giveaway in a lot of cases is you're going to have to do a VPN, right, to get into the facility. Most of the time, they're not going to public face a whole bunch of machines, right, without some kind of firewall from the facility itself. So, you'll have to VPN in, and if you have to VPN in, you're definitely going into a facility at that point. And like you said, Michael, you're going to a specific machine, whereas doing it through this service, you see a whole bunch of machines that are accessible to you. So that kind of gives away a little bit as well. Okay.
I know one thing, a question a lot of people had was if this is going to be available, this recording, to everybody afterwards. And I just want to let everybody know that everybody will be receiving a communication email with a link to this webinar at some point when this all wraps. So it will be available for everyone.
Okay.
Great.
Well, if we're done, I want to thank everybody for joining me and listening to me for an hour. It was a pleasure doing it. And Angel, I'm not sure.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Like Michael said, this webinar will be available for on-demand viewing next week. We will send everybody a notification. For now, we got to go, but thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.